Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mix It Up with ML episode 13. Mix It Up with ML is a podcast about learning from and connecting with super passionate people in their respective fields. And I'm really grateful to say that I have somebody who is very passionate about his work, my good friend Jordan Salama, on the podcast today. Thanks for joining, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So for the listeners, Jordan Salama is a 2019 graduate of Princeton University who has written about a variety of topics from American Jewish life to international soccer to climate change in the New York Times, National Geographic, Scientific American, and more. And in addition to writing, Jordan has worked on a number of television shows, including 60 Minutes and Sesame Street, and co-created a few of his own, including Princeton Tonight, Princeton's first broadcast television series and entertainment organization, and the Lulu's TV / America, a digital video series on YouTube that has more than 1 million subscribers and 500 million views from around the world. And Jordan's work has taken him to countries as diverse as Colombia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kazakhstan. So Jordan, thank you again for coming on the pod. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. This is really exciting.
Yes, sir. Awesome. So we like to start the pod usually with just a little context for the listeners as to how, my guests and I met, just so they kind of have their bearings for this conversation.
Yeah. So here's my earliest memory of you. Maybe we should start there.
Yeah.
Is that I had a little reputation, good or bad, doesn't really matter what it is,
right,
playing the piano in public spaces. So wherever I was, I would kind of sit at the piano and try to play songs. People would sing along. And if I was lucky, people would come and they would sing. And one person who always came and would sit down next to me to play the piano and to sing some songs was Mr. Michael Lotito.
Yes, sir.
So that really was, it made me realize that you were a friendly guy, that you wanted to have fun, to learn, to talk, to chat, to sing. It was wonderful. So those are some of my best memories from Princeton, actually.
Thank you for the kind words, Jordan. You're embellishing a little bit on my skills. Can't sing for the listeners at all, but Jordan can sing, and I like to.
No, Jordan cannot. Jordan cannot sing. Let's not advertise either of our singing abilities.
Okay.
We can defend ourselves on the piano, but we cannot sing.
Okay. There you go. Well, absolutely. I definitely want to ask you about the piano a little bit later at the end here, because I've been trying to work on that a little bit in this gap year myself. But Jordan is a great piano player for the listeners, among his many other talents. Great. So I like to start these pods typically, Jordan, with sort of learning about my guests' backgrounds, because I feel that really influences, like I said, what they're passionate about and sort of why. And so I read online that you are most passionate about telling stories about people and nature that connect cultures and continents. And so I would love to just sort of get a sense of your background, like your familial background, where your family is from, and sort of whether that influenced what you're really working on today and why you're pursuing that today. So I'd love to get a little bit of that background.
Definitely. So I was born and raised in New York. And so, having that kind of English background is interesting. And it's a special privilege to be able to live in America. But my family, looking back near and far into the past, are from everywhere. From Argentina, Latin America, the Middle East. I had ancestors who traded on the Silk Road, who rode horse-drawn carriages up, the mountains of the Andes to sell textiles to communities in remote areas. At my dinner tables, family dinners, still languages are thrown around, everything from Spanish to Arabic to little bits of Hebrew and French, which kind of mirrors the wandering story of my family's past. And so as a kid, I would grow up, hearing stories of my family, of my ancestors from Iraq, Syria, Argentina, the rest of Latin America. And it started out as kind of a deep desire to want to tell those stories, to document those cultures and histories so that they wouldn't disappear, because I noticed that we were of a rare breed that was kind of falling off the face of the earth. So in high school and especially I was really, I would interview like older family members and everything. And I knew that I always wanted to do something that had to do with writing. I just didn't really know what form it would take. So first I tried some documentary stuff. Then I thought maybe I wanted to write for like SNL, TV. But then when I was in college, I realized that no, really what I loved was finding ordinary people with extraordinary stories and
Yes.
sharing them with the world. And I think that you mentioned the crossing cultures and continents. And I think that's just the nature of, again, my family's background from all over the world has given me a global perspective to want to explore places that still are within me, again, even though I was born and raised in the US.
Absolutely. And so one of my questions would be for you is, what is it like to hold all those sort of identities at once? I know it definitely influenced, you kind of touched on it, right? Of like wanting to explore all those parts of you, maybe because externally they're kind of, you said sort of hard to find. Would you say that's accurate as to, how that's influenced you? Because
Definitely.
you're definitely unique in that sense, I would say.
Yeah, I'm a hodgepodge of, I'm an ethnic and cultural mixed bag.
Yeah.
That's just the truth, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting, and sometimes it's like challenging because you try to make sense of this. First of all, like growing up in the town where I grew up, like there was nobody like my family. Like there was like, or I guess it's just hard to find other people who have that kind of same mix, because it's just rare, and only in America could something like that honestly happen.
Right.
And no, but so like, I'll give an example, right? So in a certain case, right, my family are Arabic speaking Middle Eastern Jews. And in the world, right, today, those two identities, Arab and Jewish, because of conflicts around the world, are set up as two things that don't go together. But here we are as people we can't imagine it any other way.
Right.
And so to have to try to unpack those complex identities, I mean, a lot of that I do through writing and through trying to tell stories about those histories and what things used to be like, and basically looking back on the past to pave a clearer future forward for myself and for my family.
Right.
In a very basic sense.
Right. Absolutely. And so, like, for the background, your family like sort of originated from the Middle East and then moved to Latin America and then New York City. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
it's really complicated, but I like to say
Yeah.
that my family made it to the US by way of Latin America, but all of them are Syrian and Iraqi Jews who for thousands of years were in the Middle East. So
Wow.
that
Wow.
explains the whole language thing.
Yeah. And so your mix of being a Middle Eastern Jew is like even very rare over there. Like in Syria, is it pretty rare to like find Jewish people, or what is it like?
Well, now it is. So basically what happened was in the past, and these are stories again that I want to bring out into the world, right?
Yes.
In the past, before the 20th century, it was extremely common in a country like Iraq and a city like Baghdad or a city like Damascus to find Jews, Muslims, Christians, in Iraq, Yazidis, Kurds, living side by side as neighbors, friends, business partners. Like there was a rich history of coexistence in a country that now people maybe think of it as anything but. But what lessons can we learn from those times of coexistence before persecution and anti-Semitism came into the fold and caused that kind of way of life a war, right? All sorts of violence and conflict to cause that way of life to come to an end, which is what caused my family to leave, of course. And there's hardly anybody left now. So yeah, it's totally rare at the moment. But in the rest of the world, it's not so uncommon to find communities of Syrian Jews, Iraqi Jews. People are getting older and the traditions are falling away, sadly, but that's kind of our job as a younger generation to try to figure out how to maintain those very unique heritages.
Absolutely. And you're doing that through telling story, right? So that's beautiful. So let's kind of get into those stories that you're telling. I'd love to do even deeper dives in them, right? Like this is the space for it. So I'd love to hear as much as you would like to share, specifically about your new book that is coming out. If you could do a little show and tell for the
Definitely.
audience.
Show and tell.
There it is.
This is my book, everybody. It's called Every Day the River Changes, 4 weeks down the Magdalena. And it's the story of my journey down the most legendary and important river in Colombia.
Okay.
This project is going to be surprising for a lot of people who are going to read it. I think this book. It's travel writing. We're calling it travel writing for a new generation. People, young, educated readers who want to look at the world in a new and a more empathetic way.
Okay.
About a country that's often misunderstood. Colombia again, much like a lot of the countries that we were just talking about, and the United States has a certain reputation as a country of war, of narcos, of violence. Only that. And what I'm trying to do with this book, along a journey along 1,000 miles of the most important river of the country, where I'm staying with people who live along its banks and understanding their stories and sharing them with the world. I'm trying to paint a portrait of a country moving out of conflict, hopefully, and towards peace through the lens of the people living along its most important river. So it's really rooted in local voices. There's all sorts of stories about interesting and surprising characters who I meet along the way. And my hope is that it fosters a kind of more empathetic and inclusive narrative about countries in Latin America that often get the short end of the stick in that way. And there's some personal aspects to it also. I spend time with some Arabic-speaking immigrants who ended up settling along the Magdalena River. I unpack a little bit of my own identity and why I like to travel and tell stories from other places, because it helps me understand a little bit more about myself. So that's this book. And it's out in November, but you can pre-order it now anywhere that you get books. So from your local bookstore would be great, or anywhere else that you'd like. Every day the river changes. And my publisher, Catapult, and I would be so happy to tell the world about it as much as possible.
Dude, amazing. We're going to drop that link in the YouTube description and wherever else I can, for sure. Because I'll be pre-ordering that. I'm excited to read it, man. Did I get this straight, Jordan, that this is the same river that I read about, like, I think your great grandfather traveled down, and or is that incorrect? Wrong.
But good. That's wrong. But
okay.
You have a good memory, and so you're going down the right rabbit holes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another project that I'm working on that I'd be happy to talk about. But my great grandfather. So this is not. I'm not Colombian. So I mean, my family's from Argentina, but we're not Colombian. This is just my interest in a place.
Okay.
And I think there's so much value in that when done the right way. There's a lot of talk now about who can tell what kinds of stories.
I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah. Well, so I'll save it maybe, but who can tell what kinds of stories? And I think that's such an important conversation to have, because what we want to make sure is happening is that everybody has a voice, that diverse voices are in the picture. We don't want there to be kind of these like exotic portraits of other places as foreign to us. But what I do think there's extreme value in is people from other cultures meeting and learning about each other through storytelling. And that's exactly what I hope is happening in this book. And of course, I have some personal cultural ties to the region of the world. But it's definitely not a family history project, which is definitely something that I want to work on in a longer form again, family history specifically. But in this case, it's a place that is just really phenomenally interesting to me, a place much understood, and that, again, I just think is an adventure down a river that a lot of people will be surprised to learn about, but excited that they picked it up.
Absolutely. So take me through that sort of process of writing. Like, how long were you there? Like, what was the traveling like? When did you decide to do it? Like, why did you decide to do it? All sorts of stuff. I want to hear about how the book actually kind of got written.
Definitely. So it was actually my senior thesis at Princeton.
Okay.
That's how it started, the project at least. So I knew, this is kind of a long story, but I'll tell it to you if you
Dude, we got the time.
Okay, cool.
This is what it's about.
Great. So when I was in college at Princeton, I knew that I wanted to do work in Latin America. I spoke Spanish and I studied the region, and so I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I had an opportunity after my freshman year to do a kind of internship, but I got Princeton to fund the whole thing, which was great, as Princeton does, to do an internship with the Wildlife Conservation Society. So the organization that runs all the zoos and aquariums in New York, but also they have these really amazing community conservation projects around the world. And I went, and they said, we have a spot for you if you want to go to Colombia. And me, I'm thinking, Colombia, I don't know anything about this country. People say it's a very dangerous place to go. Should I go? And there was one person who kind of my earliest memory of Colombia brought me back to, and that was actually my piano teacher.
Really?
Yeah. So as a kid, I took piano lessons for a few years from a woman who's still a very close friend of mine and my family's, named Sandra. And Sandra was from Colombia, and she came from the city of Cali in the 1990s to pursue a career in music and teaching here. But for me, she opened my world to Colombia. For me, Colombia was not that country of war and violence, and that was the stigma in the United States, but it was a country of music and stories. And, basically she was my window onto this country.
Got it.
So when I had the chance to go for the Wildlife Conservation Society, the first person I called was Sandra. And she said to me, oh my gosh, you have to stay with my grandmother. She'll take care of you.
There you go.
And here I am thinking I'm going to have this like kind of sprightly grandmother, sharing a cup of coffee every morning. It was wonderful. Right. Sandra's grandmother was a wonderful woman. She didn't get out of bed and wouldn't let me leave the house after 7 p.m. because she wanted to make sure that she was doing the little that she could to keep me safe. But what that did for me was, while I was in the country, after 7 p.m. when I couldn't leave the house, I started keeping a journal for the first time. And so I would write down in longhand these stories about the people who I met every day and what was happening. And that was when I realized I wanted to write something about Colombia. So then when it came time to do my senior thesis, I thought, well, if I want to write about Colombia, what kind of story can I tell? And I went back to those journals from my time in Cali, in Colombia, written under the sweaty heat of Sandra's grandmother's house.
My goodness.
And everybody who I spoke with, I just remembered that they told me about this river that I must go to, that told the story of Colombia, the Magdalena River.
Okay.
A place that you must not miss. And so I realized, you know what, I'm going to travel this length of this river and I'm going to write about it. And that I set out to do just that. So for my thesis, I kind of collected the stories and put together this patchwork of encounters with people along the course of the river. And then one thing led to another, and I was able to publish it as a, to get a deal to publish it as a book, which I'm just tremendously grateful to all the people who made that happen for me. And then what happened was I had to basically expand and adapt the thesis to make it more of a book, basically, and not a thesis. Instead of a collection of encounters, to make it a book that fits together with a narrative about me, who I am, me as kind of a guide to this river, but also very much, again, depending on the local voices of people who I met along the way.
Right. And so when they say, this river tells the story of Colombia, and obviously, we're going to read the book and I want to learn about it through the book, but I'd love to just hear from you now in whatever sense you can give me of like, why and how does this river sort of tell the story of Colombia? And how did you get to experience that as you went through, like, the stories that you heard from people? How did it tell the story of Colombia as a country?
Definitely. It's an excellent question. And it's many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in the very general and basic sense, Colombia is a vastly diverse country of people, again, from all kinds of races and ethnicities, immigrants, indigenous peoples from all walks of life live in Colombia. And, and also vast ecological diversity. So biodiversity of forests and swamps and jungles and Andes mountains and everything that you think of Latin America's kind of stunning biodiversity, Colombia has it.
Got it.
This river cuts through it all. So it's like almost like you want a cross section of Colombia, travel down the Magdalena River. It starts in the highlands of the Andes. It takes you down through some savannas and swamps. Then it gets into once forested jungle that's unfortunately now been deforested and stripped for pastures, back into another swamp. And then you're emptied out into the dazzling Caribbean Sea.
Wow.
So it's just this spectacular river. But then the other way that it kind of tells the story of Colombia in many different senses of the word is through the history of the river itself and the people who live alongside it. Colombia, has had a complicated past, from a kind of glittering golden age of the Magdalena River, when steamboats, the thing of, fairy tales, would go up and down the river's course, and again, vast biodiversity, and it was a river of life. But then lots changed. There was violence and conflict and sedimentation of the river due to environmental degradation that really caused it to be difficult for that river to be that kind of beating heart of the country again. They like to say it was like a drained artery in the heart of a nation. And so the people who live alongside it suffered in innumerable ways. And in many ways are still kind of recovering from that. And as the country is recovering from conflict, we're looking at kind of how's the Magdalena River bouncing back, if it's bouncing back. Again, looking at the kind of recent history of Colombia, but through the lens of this river. So hopefully that gives a good sense of kind of like in general terms.
Dude, that's amazing. Because I was reading about it, before the pod, and I was like, man, I wonder how exactly this is telling the story of the country. And that gives a beautiful picture of it. So I'm excited to read about it. And so then I guess one thing that I've been thinking about is, as you're traveling along this river, so how did you travel? Did you stay in places alongside the river? Were you camping? What were you doing? Mixture of everything? What were you up to?
A mixture of everything. So the river, as I mentioned, is no longer sadly very navigable anymore for passengers. So it was a big mix, everything from pickup trucks to donkey carts to buses to cars to, fast ferry boats to wooden canoes. That's how I went along this river, basically any way that I could. And I stayed with people mainly in their homes, people in communities, again, riverside communities.
Okay.
Along the way. I like to talk about, though, how, at first I was thinking, wow, this river is not navigable anymore. I can't travel it like, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the father of Colombian literature, once wrote about traveling the Magdalena in these boats. And disappointed, right? In the sense that I couldn't recreate those experiences. But then I thought about something different. And what I thought about in that sense was, how the story would change once you're not floating on the river, but forced to go through the communities alongside it.
Boom.
Yeah. And so what happens is you get a much more people-rich tale of history and culture. Again, when you're sent through the people who through the communities and the people who live alongside this river, it's inevitable that you'll hear their stories. And it was the greatest gift in that sense, to be able to make such dear friends and to have such wonderful experiences along this river with people I still keep in touch with. I mean, 3 years after traveling down the river, like close friends of mine now.
Right.
It was amazing.
And how long did it take you to travel up and down the river, Jordan? In the story?
Four weeks down the Magdalena.
Okay. Geez, I'm not even paying attention.
No. That was a joke. That was not. You had no way to know. No, it took me about a month.
Okay. And so when you are showing up to these houses, what is that like? Were you just like, hey, can I stay in your house? And they were like, absolutely. Or what was it like?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of, but it's like a lot more prepared than that.
Right.
Especially in a case like this, where it's important to kind of do it in a responsible way.
Yes.
I really tried to like make a line of trust, I like to say, along the river, where basically, I'd when I was preparing the trip, I'd say like, okay, this friend of mine lives here, and I'd go stay with him first. And then he would say, oh, I know these people, this family who lives further down the river, you should meet them. And then in that way, each person who I met kind of inevitably impacted who I'd meet next.
Yes.
It like broadens out, right? And so people were expecting me. I wasn't showing up knocking on someone's door and being like, hey, here I am. But people were definitely surprised. I would say that. People were surprised that I was visiting places that were once places that a lot of people wanted to visit, but now have kind of lost their splendor of the past, and are trying to recover it. So it was like surprising for a lot of people that I was doing this, but everybody was so generous. I mean, the families who I stayed with, again, I've developed close relationships with them.
Right.
And it was really, I mean, I cannot imagine having done this trip and just staying by myself in like hotels or, I mean, it's just not the same. You get the experience of really, I mean, I really tried to immerse myself in people's lives and understand their experiences and their stories. That's what I try to do in all my work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's exactly what I want to ask you next. This great segue of like really the nuts and bolts of how you did this, right? So what was your process like? So you showed up there, you met these people, did you kind of get to know them for a few days or like a few hours, or how long was it? And then did you start asking them sort of structured interview questions, or did you just kind of gather it as you were with them? And then did you just write it all down in a notebook or on a laptop? Like what was that like?
Great. I mean, all great questions. So in terms of the process of meeting people and like asking them questions, when it's a travel story like this, I think that it's a lot more organic and richer if I just spend time with people and ask, can I do the things that you normally do with you?
Excellent.
And not really asking, formal, like I'm not sitting down with a recorder and asking them these sorts of questions. I mean, in some cases, sure, there were specific stories that I was going after. For example, there is the case of the invasive hippopotamuses of Colombia. There are a couple hundred invasive hippopotamuses, only wild population outside Africa that lives in the Magdalena River. And so I went to look for them and I saw them with my own eyes. But in that case, right, like I arranged an expedition of biologists and community environmental leaders to like go look for these. I wasn't going by myself, you know.
Heck no, you get
Yeah,
eaten.
definitely not.
Yeah.
But in other cases, right, where I was just like showing up in communities, I would fly kites with people. I would sit down and talk, like compare lives, compare stories, just really connect with people on a personal level, eat every meal with others, like sharing in, go swimming, go play soccer. Oh, I played so much soccer
I
along
love
the
it.
river, Michael. Yeah.
I love
Uh,
it.
it's awesome. So yeah, and then when it comes to like the writing of it, I think that I might be a little bit unique in that sense of how I go about the writing. Every time I do stories of any kind at night, I sit down and I scribble in a notebook for
Okay.
hours. So like no matter how late the day ends, let's say I'm out till 1 a.m. with people doing whatever, like keeping, like if they're out till 1 a.m., I'm out till 1 a.m. with them, no
Right.
matter what it is. I'll spend 2 hours after that, like in the light of a flashlight, no matter where I am, camping, like doesn't matter.
Wow.
Writing in a notebook, long sentences about the day, like in long paragraphs. And I found that in the transfer of those paragraphs to a computer come most of the writing that ends up being um, the final product. So it's just my way of like getting words on the page that first night while it's still really fresh in my mind, even
Right.
though it means that I'm dead when I wake up in the morning.
Right.
It's what I have to do.
And do you feel like there's any loss of information, like inevitably, right? But do you feel like you're able to really retain sort of like all the senses and the experiences and the description of the areas that you're at? Like, this is one thing I think about when I read these nonfiction accounts. Like, it's beautifully descriptive, and it must be because you're really getting it on the page, like sort of right away. And like, do you feel like you're able to really transfer that impact, or do you feel some is lost in translation?
Well, I think that, I mean, you're never going to be able to get every single detail down, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the key is doing it while the memory is still fresh in your mind. I also definitely walk around with a notebook. Like everywhere I go when I'm talking to people, I'm just constantly writing down things
Okay.
people are saying, things I'm noticing, but like in bullet points. So the transfer goes like bullet points to longhand notebook to computer. The
Nice.
computer thing I don't do necessarily even till like many weeks later when I'm back home.
Okay.
But it's that longhand notebook night that if I don't do it, like some nights I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I just
Right,
can't.
dude.
And, yeah.
How
And
do
then
you go
I
ahead? Sorry.
regret it. No, I regret it. Like if I don't do it, I regret it the next day. Cause then when I'm writing it down, I'm like, wait, there was that detail that I wanted to include, but it's not here anymore.
Yes.
And you realize like just how much memory, like you can't rely on your memory,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So it's like just a frantic writing down as much as possible all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can that get exhausting for
Oh,
you?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will tell you though, there's nothing more exhilarating than those moments. Like the best part of this job is meeting people and that kind of like fresh in my mind. I just had this amazing experience with somebody and it's or a beautiful moment like that I witnessed or something, and I just want to
Preserve.
preserve that
Yes.
fleeting moment of beauty. Yes, that's
Yes.
exactly it. Writing that down is like the most exhilarating part of the job, and
Right.
spending time like the event and then the writing down of the event is, I mean,
Right.
far none the most fascinating thing that I get to do. And I mean, it just gives me so much energy, but it's exhausting. Yes.
Like you said, I love the word preserve. That's what came to my mind. And I want to touch on this a little later, but I've even started a little bit of a journaling practice of myself just at night. And I find, bro, that I'm able to remember like the days and like what happened. It sounds a little silly, but like when I don't journal, it's like I can think back to like a week and a half ago. I'm like, what did I do then? Like, what was I thinking? What was I feeling and everything? And I think what's so beautiful, right, about your work it's just that ability to preserve. So that's definitely something I take away from your work, but I don't know if I could do what you do.
No,
Like
but
that.
that's awesome that you're doing the journaling, because I mean, it's crazy. I don't keep a journal. A lot of people will ask me, they're like, do you keep a journal every day to like write down everything that happens? And I don't, because
You already do enough of it, brother.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, like it's like a weird, I don't know. I feel like if I'm forcing myself to do it, like in that sense, it doesn't really work. But if I'm like having these moments that I want to preserve, like then it just comes naturally to me. But what was I going to say with the journaling? Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you want to preserve. Oh, this is what I was going to say. is that with like I don't keep a journal, so my days kind of blend together in normal life. But when I go on these trips, I have all these notebooks like in, on my shelf behind me where I can flip back to like, March 12th, 2020, right before the pandemic hit. I was on a beach with a shepherd in Patagonia in Argentina. And I'm like, I remember like every single day of those trips, what I did. And the memory is just so much more vivid because I wrote it down.
Yes.
So it just makes you think like, so there's so much beauty in this world. How much like is lost just every moment like that you don't write stuff down. And it's inevitable, but it's, it can make someone like me a little bit sad sometimes.
Hey man, first of all, I love that line, right? There's so much beauty in the world that you can lose, right? Like we're always in our head, just going from here to here to here to here to here to here. And then you forget, like, man, like what made me smile today? Like what happened today? What was tough today? But exactly. Bro, I think you journal enough to the point where what I think, obviously I don't know you well enough in terms of your own internal workings, but I think you're sort of getting a lot out of your journalism work, what a normal person like me kind of gets out of the day-to-day journaling. Because like you said, right, you sort of use this writing to sort of reflect on who you are internally and work through who you are, right? So I think there's a little bit of that benefit there. So don't feel too bad. I wouldn't feel too bad that you're not keeping
no, precisely,
all these journals.
That's spot on. And I was saying this to somebody the other day that it's funny at the same time, right? That like the way I process a lot of myself and my own experiences are in things that theoretically, if I'm lucky, like many people will read.
Right.
So like most people keep a journal to themselves that like, it's a diary that no one can see.
Correct.
But when I do this, I'm like thinking, man, if everything goes well, maybe Nat Geo will publish this and a couple 100,000 people will read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's daunting sometimes.
How does that make you feel? You do feel like you're able to get that personal growth and working through that, even though it's public, but does that affect sort of what you're writing and how you're feeling and how you're doing it, the fact that other people read it? Because I know myself, I would be a bit, have some trepidation there. It'd be a little rough.
Yeah, it's impossible for it not to be a little bit performative, right? In that sense where you like know that other people are going to read it. So you are writing for other people as much as you are writing for yourself.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, like I can't imagine it any other way. I've like, this is what I feel comfortable doing. And I don't think that if I didn't do this, like, I don't think that I would keep a journal for myself.
Right.
It just doesn't come natural to me.
Right.
So be it what it is, that's what happens.
I love it. Brother, I want to go back a little bit and touch on something we were talking about earlier, because we kind of went down this pathway, this fascinating pathway. But you were talking about in the beginning of the pod, this idea that, especially recent times, we're thinking about like who can tell what stories. And you were just mentioning that, you're not from Colombia, but you went through this whole experience of trying to like learn about the people there. And I think you touched on it in one sense of like, I tried to not interview them or make it feel so inorganic as just spending as much time with them as you could. But how do you feel, one, about, this idea of like telling stories in a healthy way that really represents people, and like, how do you do it? Like, how can we as a society try to do something like that? I'm interested in that from somebody like you who knows.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in the book, like it's clear throughout that I'm an outsider, right? Like coming into a place that's not my own and writing about it. Again, I mean, I think that there's certain value in that if you do it the right way. And I think that especially in today's world when there's so much division and narratives being thrown around about other people, how can we really understand each other in a way that crosses borders, crosses cultures, it's inclusive, empathetic, right?
Yes.
To tell empathetic, inclusive stories about people, like about everyday life. I think that's lost. It's been lost in our society. So, I mean, what I don't think works is doing something like what I did, right? If I were to take all those experiences and basically say, look, world, here are all of these people.
Okay.
Look like just in broad scopes, like I'm showing you this. No. Through me, I would hope that people are showing off their own lives, their own stories. Again, telling their own story. I'm just the messenger.
Okay.
I'm just the vehicle for people to share. I would hope, I mean, and this is not just the book, but just like in all my work, for
Yes.
people to be able to have these kinds of conversations on a page that wouldn't otherwise be had, to open up people's worlds to other worlds that they might not know that much about.
Yeah.
Maybe they heard about it on TV in some
Right.
context, but whatever you hear on TV is usually not the full picture of what life is like for somebody living in a place.
Okay.
And yeah, and so I think that just the key to any of this kind of storytelling is to be smart about it, to do your research, to be, again, inclusive, to make an effort to, like, you know, speak the language, or
Right.
to, you know what I mean, like those sorts of things, to make people feel comfortable telling their stories, not to feel like they're being interviewed as some kind of you know, like a figure of, you know, of like a celebrity almost, but not, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, to do it in a way that's just respectful. I think that that's just the end of the, yeah, respectful.
I love it. If you had to sort of, you said you don't want to say, look, world, like here, I'm showing you these people. If you had to put it in one sentence, or like one way to sort of contrast that method of storytelling to the method that we're talking about here, how would you put it if you could? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Like, in a sentence of what I do.
Yeah, I suppose you say, like, you want to not, you know, just say, look, world, I'm showing you these people, but you do want to do XYZ. How would you sort of phrase that if you had
Yeah,
to boil it down?
I want.
It's a tough question. I
Tough
know.
question.
I'm
It's a
putting
tough
you on the
question.
spot.
Yeah, I would hope that my work can bring out the best in people in their own voices.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Or bring out at least the truth of people in their own voices.
Right. Right.
I think that in their own voices is key. That if you're not from a place, it's very much your time, your moment. Yes, like you're seeing the readers are seeing the place through your eyes, because you're inevitably the writer and the guide, but it's your moment to kind of step back and let the people who you're spending time with take center stage, and basically just be a fly on the wall.
Yes.
Maybe that's how I'd put it, being a fly on the wall.
Love it. I love it. And that's
Instead of
nuance,
you
bro.
being the central character to everything, right? And like, here I am on this river, let's say, right? Like, no, I think that the key is the people and the histories, and, you know, yeah, being a fly on the wall is how I would put it.
Fly on the wall. And I think it's a really nuanced and subtle thing to achieve and do correctly, obviously, right? That's like why it's tough to be somebody like you and excel at it, because it's not easy. But and I do want to get to this later, but I'm thinking of, like, I like to write, bro. So I'm wondering if, like, I might do something like this someday. So yeah, I want to touch on this a little bit later as we get there. But oh man, we're flying through time here. Man, there's so much I want to ask you about. But while we're in this Latin America realm,
Sure.
bro, you covered Lionel Messi and the Argentine soccer team. Can you just tell me a little bit about that? Because I'm just geeking about that, because I'm just the biggest Messi fan, bro, and just would love to just hear about that experience and just sort of like what that was like. I think it was
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool.
yeah. That's the crazy story of my life, I think.
Okay.
So I was in college. You know the Copa America, the soccer tournament?
Bro, I watched the whole thing that you covered in 2016.
Oh, perfect. Great.
I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan, bro.
Okay,
Huge.
amazing. Good. Me too. So the Copa America was coming to the United States.
Okay.
And I, being the gigantic Argentina fan that I am, thought,
Right.
I want to see as many games of this tournament of Argentina as possible.
Right.
But I can't afford to pay for all the tickets. So I was like, how could I do this in a way that I could go to the games for free and maybe get something out of it too? So I applied to FIFA as a journalist.
Away.
For press credentials. And don't tell anybody I did. I mean, she knows now, so you can tell her. But there's this wonderful woman in the town over from me that runs a newspaper called Westchester Hispano, which is a Spanish language newspaper for in the New York area. And I said to FIFA, without having ever contacted them, that I worked for them. I said, I'm a journalist for Westchester Hispano. Can you please give me a pass to cover the Copa America? And they said yes. And here I was with tickets to literally any game that I wanted to go to in this tournament.
Brother.
So, and then instead of being a scam artist, which would have made me to be a scam artist had I then moved forward with this plan, I instead then went to Westchester Hispano and I said, hey, I have these press credentials. Would you let me write for you?
Right.
And they said yes.
Yeah.
And so my deal with them was, if you pay for me to get to the games, I'll write for free.
Wow.
And
Bro, you're a
so,
shrewd businessman.
yeah. I
Dude.
mean, look, I knew what I had to do to
Yeah.
see Messi in person.
Yeah.
So I went to like Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, watched a bunch of Argentina games, and one of the games, after the game was over, the players they come through the tunnel and you're able to ask some questions, and I got to ask Messi a question. So that was
You're
pretty
kidding,
awesome.
dude.
He was like right here, like very,
You
very close.
spoke to him and asked him a question.
Mhm.
All right, I just need to like take a few seconds. Oh my gosh.
It was peak for me. I mean, why am I even doing anything else? Forget about the book. I got to talk to Messi, so
Bro,
that
that
was
is
yeah.
I'm speechless, honestly, because I just think he's on. They call him Dios, right? He's literally a god. What like did you feel that? What was the energy like? Was
Yeah.
it sort of like pretty mundane? He just seemed like a regular guy, or did you feel like, oh my god, like this is Messi? What was that like?
No, it was definitely, oh my God, this is Messi. I mean, like they all walked through and they're like super close, right? And there's all these journalists who are like from TV stations, and then me, like little idiot me, I was like
Yeah.
18 or whatever. I'm like standing there with my little voice recorder.
Yeah.
I was like, Messi, 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 Leo, Leo, Leo. I kept saying in Spanish, like, come over here, come over here.
Yeah.
And he stopped in my little like area with all the other journalists. Everybody's taking their microphones out, and I was like, "How do you?" I didn't know what to ask. I'm just stupid. I just didn't think of a question. I was like, how do you feel after the game? To be back after your injury or something like that.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I feel good. And he said something that doesn't really mean much. But he answered my question. So that was pretty cool.
He answered your question, bro. Oh my gosh. If you have that voice recording or whatever you have, dude, I might hit you up and ask you for that just to like
Send it your way.
Oh my God, brother. So yeah, and just what was that like? I mean, this is just kind of me talking, soccer fan to soccer fan, to watch him sort of lose that Copa America, bro. And
oh, it was terrible.
I remember where I was when he missed the penalty and they lost to Chile in the PK shootout, bro. It was heart wrenching, very hard to watch.
Yeah. So I was there. It sucked. I'll tell you one thing that this experience did make me realize, though, and that day especially.
Yeah.
I do not want to be a sports journalist.
Why?
So much of what, like, the joy I get watching Argentina or watching Barcelona, right, like, is like watching with family, being with my brothers, with my dad, like watching the games. Yes. Even if I'm not, like, who cares if you're there or not, like watching it on TV.
Right.
Like, I was by myself when Argentina lost that Copa America. I was like covering it for the press box. I was like, this is not as fun as one would think. But it was a great experience. So, and it was also very sad that they lost. I remember walking out of the stadium with all the other Argentina fans, just like with our heads down. Yeah.
Do you feel like, just a brief question here, I've just heard that the Argentine press just kind of kills him back in Argentina, maybe less so now, but because he hasn't brought them, the international glory outside of, I guess the gold medal in the Olympics, they're not really happy with. But do you feel, that the sports journalists have, kind of made that tough for for him and for Argentina in general, like the whole soccer team at all? Like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I was just,
I don't know. I mean, there's immense pressure on these guys.
Immense.
Just immense. I mean, more so, I think, than most other sports in the world. Like, the entire country is just like built around this one team to like do well.
And one guy, bro.
And one guy, really, yeah, for the longest time. And now the pressure has waned a little bit because he's like seen as and respected as the player that he is. And so, and there's a new crop of young guys. He's like kind of the leader of this new generation, which is nice. He brought them to 3 finals, though, in a row.
Right.
2014, 2015, 2016, World Cup, Copa America.
Yeah.
And they lost 1 in overtime and 2 on penalties.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. A lot of it's luck in the end, but there is a lot of pressure on the poor guy.
I agree. Hoping for him to win this Copa America this year, bro. Let's cross our fingers.
Exactly.
Let's cross our fingers, brother. I had to ask you that one. I was super excited when I saw that. Okay, dude, we have a couple more minutes. I guess like 10 to 12 more minutes ish here. One thing I wanted to ask you about now is switching gears to sort of your producing work, because you do a lot of writing and then a lot of producing as well. Got a lot of success on the producing side, specifically with Lulu's, which is basically like early childhood educational content, essentially. Is that accurate? And could you just talk a little bit more about that and that journey where, like, your first video got 50 million views and sort of like what's going on there, man? That's
Yeah,
really cool.
so that's exactly what happened. Is that when I was really little, my brothers and I sang the Wheels on the Bus and took a video of it and put it up on YouTube, probably just to like show our cousins, see if like they were really young. So we were like, maybe they'll like it. And we didn't look at it for like 4 years. And then and one day we checked, we're like, I wonder how this is, what's going on with this video that we put up? Let's watch it again for fun. Had like 25 million views. We were like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then like it only kept going up and up and up. And we were like, wow, we should do something with this. So then we started singing nursery rhymes on the internet.
Okay.
Kept it a big secret from all my high school friends. They had no idea. They only found out like a couple of years ago.
Right.
I found out that I kept it from them. But I don't know, like, yeah, it was just a way to try something new. And it was a great experience. We don't really do it as much anymore. Things have changed on YouTube, but it was kind of that was how I learned how to edit videos. It was how my brothers and I learned how to produce content like that. It was really like, without thinking of it in that way initially, it was like really special experience, and to work on it with them too. I have two younger brothers, right? So
yeah,
it's fun to be able to do that sort of stuff together.
Yeah.
And it's blossomed into these like side projects, which I'm always happy to talk about, but aren't as necessarily relevant. But yeah, I mean, like it's the craziest thing is like I was along the river in Colombia, right, or in Argentina, let's say, at a birthday party.
Right.
My kids who I'd like never met before recognized me from the video.
That's so sick, dude.
Yeah. So I have like selfies with like 5-year-old boys.
Oh my God.
Like who were like fans of the Wheels on the Bus.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, this is what I've become.
Right.
But no, I mean, it just like made us realize that the world is large and there are people all over the place who are actually truly like enjoying our content.
Yeah.
And so and so we wanted to like make it worthwhile. And so it like just inspired us to do better.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said YouTube has changed a little bit now. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, they changed like for children's content on YouTube, the regulation.
Okay.
And so it just made it more difficult for people like us to continue making the content. So, it was the end of an era, but it did, it served its purpose for us at the time. So
still a really cool era, in my opinion. I think it's pretty awesome.
It was a cool era. And it seems cool to you, Mike, because you don't have to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in your basement on a school break.
Right.
but yeah.
Right. And my friends aren't making fun of me. I got you. I got you.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes. So, and then is America or the America sort of like that side project that you were talking about that spun out of it?
So that that was cool, right? So like Lulu's America, which we're calling it America, kind of like a brand for parents and kids. It's very much like kind of getting off its feet, a home for almost like kind of all my storytelling. And my brothers do a couple projects like this also, so it'll all kind of fit under that umbrella.
Yeah.
But my first year out of college, I got a fellowship from the Princeton Reach Out, which you know about.
Yep.
It's a wonderful organization that's mission is to provide young graduates with the tools and the resources to pursue projects in public interest. So journalism is in the public interest. And so they let me spend a year in Latin America looking for stories. And initially it was going to be a kids video series, which we made a bunch of episodes of this kids video series in English and Spanish, and it was great. But at the same time, I was able to freelance as a journalist in these countries. So like we had the kids content, and then we had what the parents are going to read to like get more media information about these places.
Right.
And it was amazing. I mean, it was a really wonderful time. And unfortunately it was cut short, like the travel aspect of it because of the pandemic, but everybody has, that's life now. And so, but I mean, I'm tremendously grateful to them because they essentially invested in me as a storyteller, thinking like that I would, if I was given the resources to do this kind of work, that I would generate stories that would have significant social impact. And that's always the goal, right? Is that like the story will make a difference in the world. And that happened, and like seeing that happen on a real scale, like impacting people's lives it means the world. Like it's the most fulfilling thing of all. It doesn't matter how many things you publish, but when you see that it's like helping people in their everyday lives, like that's just wonderful. So it was special in that way. And it gave me the flexibility to kind of like launch my career in the sense that hopefully I'll be able to do this for a long time because of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so you said this is kind of going to be your storytelling hub. You're like, what sort of stuff are you going to do on this
Well, oh,
channel
sorry.
and
So
whatnot?
yeah, I
Yeah.
totally got off track.
No, dude.
Yeah, America. The idea is like from the Americas,
Right.
video storytelling that will take many forms. Maybe it could live, or audio storytelling could live on that platform. So one thing that I was trying to do this year that was interesting was to interview Latin American artists who I really admire,
Yeah.
who in English though, so not in Spanish, but in English, to
Okay.
bring to an English speaking audience these stories about culture in the Americas that I think are important. Um, yeah, that's one thing, and the kids content is another. I mean, it's just like we have a large audience. It's a means of bringing these stories out into the world. If they're not deemed necessarily like commercial in the mainstream outlets, but it's still an important story, here's where we're going to put it, and
Yeah.
it'll make sense there.
Dude, I love it. And like you said, the world is so vast. You can really connect with people in so many ways, as you've seen through your channel. And so hopefully I'm trying to be like you a little bit, bro. Like just kind of make myself a citizen of the world in some way through the internet. Like let the internet sort of leverage those connections. So keep doing what you're doing there.
Exactly. You keep doing what you're doing, because I mean, these sorts of conversations that you're having with people are so, like, they illuminate, again, you're saying passionate people who have conversations about people's passions and everything. Like at the end of the day, I mean, what makes a life meaningful, like what makes everything worth it, is doing something that you love, that you're passionate about, and hopefully that also helps other people.
That's it, man.
Right. And so you're bringing those stories to light too. So in many ways, you're a journalist. I mean, that's what this is.
Man, you're too kind, bro. I appreciate that. And like, I have like one or two more questions for you, a couple more if we have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Just like last bit on the producing part, how do you view this? I was curious, like, how do you view this part of your work as different or similar to the writing part? What is your process for that? Like what are the pros and cons for that? It's two different kind of worlds, right? But doing similar storytelling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think about it a lot, like how people our age are consuming nonfiction stories, right?
Yes.
And as much as I want to continue writing books, and I will continue writing these sorts of long form nonfiction written pieces, which I think are really important for detail and nuance and all that, as I've mentioned, I think that there's also a lot to be said that of like how people want to get these things a little bit quickly.
Right.
And to make sure that just because things are coming to you quickly doesn't mean that they're dumbed down or insensitive or whatever, like in the way that it's so easy to just make things really oversimplified on video platforms, for example, right? But like my ultimate dream, right, would be to have these written stories in magazines and newspapers and books, and to pair that with kind of like being the host of a video series, right, or an audio series that brings these stories to life in another way that's side by side with a written piece. That way, no matter how you want to consume that story, there will be a place for you.
Bro, I mean, I don't really throw this word around lightly. I feel like it's kind of genius, right? Like I've never heard of somebody transporting the same story into different formats. I've never actually heard of that. Is there a precedent for that you're kind of drawing inspiration from?
I think I think that like Nat Geo is a really good example.
Nat Geo does that? Okay.
Yeah, like they will tell stories through a TV show, a magazine story, beautiful photographs, like they'll do it all, right? A podcast. I think that, but they're also gigantic brands, so like they have all the resources and the manpower to do that. It's harder when you're a freelancer just getting your start, so it'll take some time,
right?
But yeah, no, I think there's a lot to be said for like doing that the right way. I don't know if there's that many examples of it, and I haven't done it myself, right? So like, again, I'm just getting started, and it's a long, lofty dream of mine to be able to do something like that, to maybe be in a place like Nat Geo, to be able to kind of spin the gears in all different directions so that a story could live on multiple different platforms.
Bro, I encourage you to do that, because like you said, I think there is some credence to this idea that, Twitter is sort of bite-sized, like inflammatory, statements, or like TikTok is short form and like not telling the whole story. But like you said, there's a place for long form and short form, right? And it caters to different audiences. And I think for better or for worse, our attention spans are decreasing overall as Homo sapiens. So good for you for trying to cater to that. And I really encourage you to keep that up. That's pretty dope.
Thanks. Yeah, attention spans are decreasing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's true and it's kind of sad, but that doesn't mean that we, I say by like people who make content for people whose attention spans are decreasing, as our own attention spans decrease as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means that like we should let that bring us down. I think that it means that we meet the moment, right? And we figure out TikTok, short form stuff. But I'm sure you can be really creative with TikTok and find ways that people will want to experience these kinds of stories. So,
brother, I love it. Flowing with the times, right? Not resisting it too much, holding on to the good parts of the past, but just flow with the times, dude.
Now you're flowing with the times. You're telling that to the guy who keeps a paper calendar.
So, and you also write letters. Another great article of yours.
I do.
But this is what I'm saying, bro. You hold on to some great things of the past, but then you stay with the times as well. It's possible to take what was great about back in the day while also not being, anachronistic, way out of place, right? I think it's a way to do it. I think you're a good example. Dude, last question. This one I like to always end on, just ask people about like, who are you outside of this writing, producing, workflow centered guy? What do you like to do as your hobbies, your passions? You mentioned piano. What are some other things that bring you joy?
Yeah, I love a good sing along, as you know.
Yes.
Nothing makes me happier than that. A bunch of people getting around a piano or a guitar and singing some songs.
Yeah.
I love playing soccer, as we've covered in this conversation. Watching soccer, playing tennis, hiking. Oh, I love to kayak. That's another thing. I'm a big kayaker.
Okay.
By myself, with other people, whatever. If I can get out on a kayak in the water, I'm extremely happy.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Spending time with my family. I'm very close. I have a big family, but we all, live in the same similar area. So it's very nice to all get together.
Yeah.
Especially now after a year of not. Yeah, it's lots of things bring me joy. And it just so happens that I write about a lot of them.
Yes, exactly.
So
and that's
it's
beautiful.
not that, it's not that everything is work necessarily, but I'm lucky that my work gets to touch on the things in my life that make me very happy. Or curious, yeah, that's a nice way to end.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's beautiful, amazing. Jordan, I feel like I learned a lot from you as I thought I would. I'm really grateful for you taking your time, man. Thank you. And for the listeners, check out the link below to Jordan's new book, Every Day the River Changes. 4 weeks down the Magdalena. 4 weeks.
Coming. 4 weeks. Coming to a theater near you. But
near you.
Just a bookstore near you.
Exactly. Thank you, listeners. You made it this far. You're a real one. We appreciate you. Good night, everybody.